paper that John Campbell reviews in the last week or so that is actually the report on a single autopsy of a gentleman, I believe a British gentleman, who died after COVID vaccination. If I recall correctly, he'd had 3 mRNA shots. And anyway, so this is a autopsy report that his family was concerned that his death did not appear to make sense. He was in his 70s. Can you show that clip from John Campbell?
It's the autopsy one.
Yes.
Okay.
So we can say definitively that this damage was caused by vaccine, not by the natural infection. Let's have a look at the proof for that now. So here we see the SARS coronavirus 2 virus that we're familiar with, the spike protein here, of course. Now, the spike protein can occur on the virus itself, or the spike protein is also generated by the vaccine. But the nucleocapsid protein is inside. It's associated with the RNA, the actual ribonucleic acid of the virus. And the nucleocapsid protein is only found in the virus. It's never generated by a vaccine. So if you see spike protein on its own, that means it's vaccine. If you see spike protein and nucleocapsid protein, it means it's natural viral infection. That's the difference between the two. Now, in this first slide, we're looking at the frontal part of the brain, and we can see patches of degeneration and inflammation. On this next picture, we can actually see acute brain damage as well. Whenever there's a 1, that's death of a nerve cell, neuronal death. And 2 is microglial infiltration. These are the defense cells in the brain. And 3 are lymphocytes, which are associated with viral infection. And of course, all of these are pathological findings. None of them should be there.
Is that where you wanted me to go?
Yep. Okay, so I'm not going to translate this into English because John Campbell speaks English probably better than I do, but I am going to translate it into slightly less technical language so people can get the full impact here. What we have is evidence of substantial, that is to say, visible on microscope slide, brain damage in this now deceased patient. And the question is, why? What they found is spike protein in the area of damage. That's conspicuous, but that potentially has 2 different explanations. The vaccines produce spike protein, and the virus obviously produces spike protein. So in and of itself, that could be consistent with either. But what they in fact find is that spike protein is present, and another protein, nucleocapsid protein, which we have discussed before, nucleocapsid protein being proteins associated with the genetic content of the virus, is completely absent, even though in normal virus, nucleocapsid protein is actually more prevalent than spike. So were this the result of a cryptic COVID infection, it would be that both proteins were present. And in fact, what we have is only the protein produced by the virus itself. But further, and this is the point, this is the reason I'm using this particular clip from Campbell in conjunction with this discussion of models. Further, what is shown in these microscope slides and in this report is the presence of T lymphocytes at the site of A, brain damage, right? You've got dead neurons here, you've got spike protein, you've got microglial cells, and you've got T lymphocytes, okay? Now, all of that is actually the validation of the hypothesis that I put on the table. I will have to look up when it would have been the first time I discussed it, but I presented a model for vaccine damage to the body. We've talked about it a number of times since, but the model says you've got lipid nanoparticles that coat an mRNA message that encodes spike protein. Those lipid nanoparticles coating this genetic message do not stay local to the injection site, at least in some people, but probably all people. They escape into the circulatory system, they float around the body, and conspicuously, the vaccine manufacturers have no targeting mechanism whatsoever, which means they will be taken up by cells, I don't want to say randomly because it may not be random, but arbitrarily, cells that the vaccine manufacturers did not choose in any way. They didn't specify them as cells that you could afford to lose and therefore could afford to make this message and then suffer the consequences. And so what that means is that they will be taken up by cells in the circulatory system, very conspicuously in the heart. And then something terrible will very predictably happen. That very terrible thing is that the immune system will spot the cells of your own body producing a foreign protein, and they will make the only conclusion that your immune system could possibly make in that situation. Because that is exactly the marker for a viral infection, where your cells have been hijacked by a pathogen, and they start producing foreign proteins. And then the point is, in such a case, there's no rescuing such a cell. Once it has taken up this foreign message, killing that cell, even though that's bad, is better than the alternative.
That's what the immune system is designed to do.
Right.
That's what it's for.
Right. Hundreds of millions of years of evolution have built it to spot this very common phenomenon and to deal with it in the unfortunate but best way possible, which is to kill off the cells that have been infected. Mm-hmm. And so by creating a pseudo-infection, which is what these mRNA vaccines are, mm-hmm. They are effectively painting a target on cells in your body, whichever ones take up the lipid nanoparticle message, lipid nanoparticle coded message. They are targeting them for destruction and autoimmune destruction of your own cells. And worse, this would be a temporary phenomenon, but they stabilize the damn mRNAs so that they don't go out of functionality and return the cells to an innocuous presentation that then stops triggering the immune system. Yeah. So anyway, here, what John Campbell has revealed and what that little clip shows is, lo and behold, all of the things that you would predict from that model, which I spelled out, are true. You have...
So the thing that you haven't said yet, the connection, is that the T lymphocytes there in the brain next to the obvious brain damage is an indication that they were there looking for cells that were spouting viral messages. Viral message.
So here you have damaged, you have a person who did not have an infection of the brain. We don't see any evidence of that here. What they had was a pseudo-infection of the brain with the mRNA messages encoded in the mRNA vaccines that was apparently transcribed in the brain into spike protein, caused the immune system to freak out, as of course it would, to then target cells and kill them. And you have the only thing we don't have is a live movie of this happening. What we have is all of the consequences that you would expect, sure, all here in a static microscope slide. And the point is, look, that vaccine wasn't supposed to reach the brain, right? It wasn't supposed to get into the brain. That's already a major design flaw. Having reached the brain, it shouldn't be particularly prone to transfect those cells. But of course, how would it not? It's a dumb particle. It's just covered in fat. It's going to transfect whatever cells will absorb it. Mm-hmm. And so here you've got a case, and yeah, it's only one case. But nonetheless, you've got a guy who has a vaccine injury that has produced brain damage that has left its signature, making it unmistakably the consequence of vaccine spike protein and not COVID spike protein. And you have the obvious activation of the white blood cells countering what they must think, to the extent that they behave like they think, is an infection.
So let me just try to steelman the opposition here. Are there any known cases of SARS-CoV-2 in the body? The spike protein gets loose. Can the spike protein travel on its own in the body? Do we have any cases of that? I think the answer is no. But so if it could, then you would see that signature that is otherwise a vaccine signature somewhere. I think that's the only way, though, that this indication, this smoking gun of either there's spike protein and nucleocapsid protein in evidence in the place where the damage is, or if there's only spike protein, then it's vaccine injury. If there's both, it's virus injury. unless the spike protein can ever disassociate from the virus in vivo.
Well, I would bet that it
take
does all the time, because the mechanism, if you get, let's take the unusual nature of SARS-CoV-2 out of the picture.
Yeah.
You get an infection with a coronavirus. It invades some cells. It causes those cells to produce foreign protein. Those cells produce new virus, which goes around infecting your own cells, trying to get out of you into somebody else. But what happens is, as the immune system gets better and better at recognizing the infected cells, it does break them apart. And so almost...
So fragments.
Fragments.
Sure. Yeah.
But were that the case?
If it's just like broken apart fragments, it doesn't have any ability to mobilize.
Well, it shouldn't be spike and no nucleocaps. You could imagine a weird ratio. You could imagine the spike protein is more durable, and so the nucleocapsid proteins get broken up at a higher rate, but they're produced in higher numbers to begin with.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be getting into the brain in the first place, right?
Sure, but that's a different question.
It may or may not be, right? So the point is, you've got a pathology that flows from these mRNA vaccinations. One of the things that we talked about, for which I believe actually we were attacked by PolitiFact, I'm not sure it was PolitiFact, but somebody claimed to have fact-checked us on this, was the blood-brain barrier question about the fragmentation of the blood-brain barrier from the spike protein in the damn so-called vaccines.
Yep.
So anyway, the point is, look, is this proof positive? No. But proof positive isn't a scientific thing.
Right.
What this is a bunch of different predictions of a model that show up in a case, right? And then the point is this as good as, an eclipse proving relativity? No. But what it is it's damn good evidence that that model was capable of looking into the future and predicting the results of somebody's autopsy.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
So given that...
And to get more evidence of similar sort, unlike in physics, we don't have to wait almost 20 years.
Right. And... okay, so then here's my point.
Unlike in that particular instantiation of physics, right?
That weird, very famous case.
Yeah.
Here's my point, okay? The payoff of all of this is not even the model, okay? The model is great. The fact that we now have a model that says not only do we have an effect, right? This isn't correlation equals causation. This is, here's a model that predicts damage in an individual, right? Okay, but now... the payoff comes from the extrapolation. Now we can go back to that model and we can say, okay, if this model overlaps the truth substantially, which I think is probably the correct way to say it, right? What else does it tell us? Oh, well, here are the other things it tells us. It tells us that you have a completely indiscriminate transfection agent that is going to cause your own immune system to damage tissues arbitrarily around the body. And the effect of that will be that it's not causing myocarditis. Yes, it causes myocarditis, but myocarditis is going to be one on a long list of pathologies, most of which, or maybe all of which, are more subtle, in which various tissues around the body are damaged by your own immune system responding to this vaccine being effective in places that the manufacturer either didn't anticipate or wasn't honest about.
So what you mean when you say it doesn't cause myocarditis is that myocarditis and pericarditis, being injuries to muscle associated with the heart, myo, or the pericardium, the membrane around the heart, peri, are going to reveal themselves more easily because of the fact that the heart does not have repair capacity. See Brett's earlier work on telomeres and cancer and senescence, right? So that's what we're going to see first. That does not mean that it's the only damage that's happening by a long shot. The model says, and here we have evidence supporting the model with what you have revealed from John Campbell here, that the damage will be everywhere. depending on the particulars of, whether your shot was aspirated, how healthy you were at the time, how healthy you are in general, exactly, where it went in your body, and what other viral load you might have had at the time, et cetera, et cetera. Like all sorts of things are going to affect what tissues in you may have gotten affected, but were there tissues that were affected? 100%, because actually that's the mechanism of action of the thing.
Right.
That's the intended mechanism of action of the mRNA vaccines, is that they will transfect some cells, and then your immune system will come in and learn from them and figure out how to prevent future infection, which of course we now know doesn't work.
Right. And in fact, if you were to go to that, before we had this particular result, if you were to say, well, is it going to nail all tissues? Maybe not, right? There may be tissues which, for whatever molecular reason, don't take up the lipid nanoparticle very well. Sure. So you could have little or no damage. I don't know that there are such tissues, but there could be, right? But if I was going to say, where would you expect an exception? Mm-hmm. The brain might be most likely because of the blood-brain barrier. But the point is, here you have it. You have the exact prediction of this model, which suggests that this is going to be happening. You're going to have itises all over the body, and the itises aren't just inflammation. That is inflammation that is downstream of damage. And the point is, okay, you could basically now name your pathology, because you're talking about, which tissues are perfused with blood? Virtually all of them, right?
Right.
So The point is, you can in principle get damage just about anywhere. And so, the other thing that we now have to look at is, how did we end up? This has been a very painful educational process, figuring out what exactly they were proposing and what exactly it suggested might be the hazards. Yeah. But now that we know, now that we can look back, this technology had no business being utilized in people, right? Not because
they've been trying for so long, Brett.
Not because it isn't brilliant in principle. It solves a major problem, a gene therapy problem, which is, how do you get enough genes into enough cells to actually treat a pathology? Okay, that's a difficult problem.
Well, it also solves a time of onset of time of realization. There's a pathogen to realization of the treatment problem. Like the time scale is remarkable.
And you can imagine people who have a financial interest in this technology thinking, damn, we're so close. This thing is really incredibly capable if we can just get past a couple hurdles. Oh, what will it take? Oh, about 50 years to solve the targeting problem and get through the regulatory proof that we've solved it well enough that we're not going to kill huge numbers of people, right? Can you wait 50 years? No, I'll be dead. Can you get it to me sooner? And so that's the question, is, did they utilize a global emergency to fast forward, to get us not to notice that they had a targeting problem they couldn't solve, right? And to get this technology so mainstreamed that it's now like, oh, well, get ready. We're going to start doing flu vaccines with the mRNA tech. Really? You still haven't solved the problem. And the fact is, the model that I presented, right? The model that we now have some evidence turns out to be predictive of things like autopsy results.
Yep.
That model says, actually, the pathology, nothing to do with COVID. Yes, it's bad that they chose spike protein. That's bad. Spike protein has its own added pathologies.
So you mean the pathology from the vaccine?
Yes. The vaccine pathology is simply about foreign proteins produced indiscriminately by human cells that then get targeted by the immune system, right? And so the point is, okay, now you want to tell me you want to do other shots with this platform, that it's so marvelous. You still haven't solved the main problem that should have prevented you from injecting this into any people at all, right? You still haven't solved it. And now you're like, what else can we use it for, right? So it's mind-blowing that we would be there, but that is where we are. And anyway, I do want to go back and just emphasize the fact that the model says heart damage may be noticed first. Heart damage may be more serious because it's your damn heart, right? It's not some big, necrosis in your liver that you might well survive or not even notice, right? This is your heart. Any damage to it is serious, right? It's not just that, but the fact is, this is a destroyer of future capacity for repair, right? So the fact that myocarditis is predictive of other itises that are actually the result of damage, not just inflammation, across the body is the payload, right? Now we need to look for these things, and we need to figure out how to minimize the damage that's already been done to protect the people who have had these things, right? Maybe we need to engage in some new kind of scanning to find damage that may catch these people unaware. Anyway, the payload is the model. The model predicts things well beyond the heart, and it is time for us to now be paying attention because the evidence is quite clear. And really also the onus is on those who say, well, it's one patient, right? It's not really very much evidence. Well, no. Now the burden of proof is on you to prove that that patient was highly anomalous rather than this is now something that we do see when we look elsewhere, right? You can't use the fact of not looking as a falsification.
How about we begin autopsies of people who've experienced unexpected death?
Which we absolutely should have been doing and we're resisting doing for some reason, deeply buried in the catacombs of public health.